Watercolor can be pretty intimidating, but with some simple techniques, you can learn to make art that makes you look like a pro. As you see in front of you, there's a couple different paintbrushes that you can use. These are what your watercolors are normally going to look like. They're in smaller tubes like this, usually because it's less is more with watercolor. Your brushes are going to be, you have our middle round brush. This is really good for doing wet on wet. Also for covering large areas, it's really good at holding lots of water. Our big flat brush is also good at covering large areas, and this one holds the most amount of water. Our smaller brushes, as you can probably guess, good for details. This is also good for doing wet on wet, but it is also, it holds a lot less water, so it's good for, detail work if you're doing more like a dry brush. I have Q-tips over here because I'm going to show you a technique in which you can use Q-tips. I just quickly did a wet on wet to use for this. And for the alcohol technique, what you're going to do is you're going to use just regular household alcohol, the 50%, 25%, just regular rubbing alcohol. I like to use Q-tips, but you can also use your small round brush as long as you clean it out afterwards. You just simply dip this in the alcohol and touch the areas. So the alcohol actually works as a repellent for the watercolor. And depending on what object you use to put the alcohol down, it's going to leave that mark. The last technique I'm going to show you is a wet on wet technique. This is very popular and it's actually pretty easy to do. This example that I have here is something that I did a while ago with the wet on wet so that you can see what it looks like when it dries. It has a very tie-dye, fluid kind of feel to it, but I'm actually going to add more onto this. For the wet on wet, you want to use your middle round brush. Like any other thing, you're going to put a lot of water on it and choose a color. And I'm just going to kind of play around, move it around. It is okay if it puddles up. It's all right if it goes over other colors. You can make designs with it. I think I'm going to put some orange over it. Now, as you see with the orange, it just runs right into the yellow. But the more pigment you use, the more areas of saturation you will have, which gives it a better look. And that is your wet on wet. It's very easy, very quick, but it leaves a really cool feeling in your painting. All right, the last technique that I'm going to show you is using salt. This one is probably one of my personal favorites because you can make the salt have your you can make the salt do really cool things with your watercolors. This again is just a wet on wet template that I just did, super quick. I have my sea salt grinder. You can use pretty much any type of salt. You can use Epsom salt, regular table salt, coarse salt, sea salt, and the bigger the salt, the more reaction you're pretty much going to have. So basically, I'm just going to grind this over my wet pigment, concentrate it in this one corner, brush all the excess off. And if you can see, the salt works to kind of clump up areas. All right, now it's review time. You guys learned in this tutorial how to use the wet on wet technique, how to do a wash for your background, how to use salt and alcohol, your everyday and you can fool your friends into thinking you're a professional watercolorist. Thanks.